Welcome to the Commercial Real Estate Podcast powered by First National. I am Aaron. He is Adam. We're sitting here at RealCapital as part of the speaker video series sponsored by Kingset Capital. Our return guest, a gentleman by the name of Michael Brooks, is the CEO of RealPac. Michael, thanks for joining us again.
My pleasure. Look forward to it.
Nice to have you in person. I think it's been a while since we've done this. Sitting here, there's a lot going on in your world, and we're going to kind of go around the horn a little bit, talking about the things that are keeping you busy and keeping your team busy. Before we do that, and I know we've covered it in the past, but just maybe elevator. What is RealPac? What do you do?
Yeah, so RealPac is a 55-year-old trade association now. Only Canadian national association for commercial real estate owners. Over $1 trillion of AUM by our members. Every pension fund in Canada, every TSX listed REIT and real estate operating company, all the banks, all the life cos, many large private companies now. So broadly, just call it institutional real estate. Like a lot of trade associations, we do four main things: connect people at the senior level, advocate for the industry, support the industry with research and best practice documents, and convening meetings. We have 18 standing committees at RealPac, and educate the industry, educate people coming up, people who want to change fields within real estate. So that's us in a nutshell.
And you've been there for how long?
I've been there since 1997. So what is that? 27 years, 28 years. This September coming up.
That's the year I graduated high school.
There you go.
It's been a while.
He was fresh out of high school too.
That's right.
So let's.
What's the hit list?
Yeah. You want to go? Yeah. Let's whatever order you want to go in, Michael. Where would you like to start? You think is the most sort of pressing?
Well, let's start with tariffs, which was the subject of the fireside chat that I had today at RealCapital. I think it's on everybody's mind. I think it's upsetting to a lot of people. Trump's seemingly in the news every day, making another claim. We have the 51st state insult. We have the Governor Trudeau insult. Demeaning language, the threat of tariffs, claim that he wants to take jobs from Canada. I mean, this is fearful stuff. So for a country used to taking people at their word, this is worrying for us as a country. And I think what we've seen as a result, and we're still seeing it, is that Canadian pride, that pride of all of us that, you know what, we're not going to take this lying down. We're hockey players and we just got elbowed in the nose. We don't take that. So I think it's net a good thing in the short term. It's got us all thinking about how we can be better as a country, removing interprovincial trade barriers, being a little more pro-business and pro-profit in this country, and getting our act together and in embracing innovation, embracing more manufacturing, reshoring, all the things we should have been doing for quite some time if it wasn't that we were so complacent.
What drove sort of the attack by Trump, the insults, do you think?
I think a lot of this for Trump is negotiating style. So there's something in negotiation tactics called anchoring. And the anchoring philosophy is you ask for something that's at the far end of outrageous.
Like development applications, same idea.
Development applications, you ask for the moon, and then you make the other side feel good when, you carve that back a bit because you anchored it with your opening request. So I think that he is a master at anchoring and almost with a shocking initial position. If you think about his shocking initial position on Gaza, let's just kick out all the Palestinians and we'll make this into one giant resort. That's a shock, but he's anchored. He's now anchored the discussion around the starting point. maybe even Ukraine as well. Give us all your valuable minerals, and then maybe we'll protect you. So we, as a country, Canada, we've been on our heels because we didn't do the same thing, and now we're trying to claw that back to something reasonable. We haven't asked to stop the flow of guns into our country. We haven't said that fentanyl's coming up from the U.S. as well. We haven't claimed that they're dumping products in Canada. So, look, there's a lot going on, and as I said, it's troubling.
I want to go to interprovincial trade, and then we'll talk about the impact it has on housing and
Yeah.
real estate. We'll bring it back that way. But it is amazing. We see it immediately. There's a lot of discussion about breaking down some of the barriers between interprovincial trade. I'm appalled at some of the nuances between the provinces and just how hard we've made it, almost legislatively, to get goods from one province to the other. Because trades have gone north-south forever, and we've never really had to think about it. And so there's all of this, I don't know, nuisance of paperwork that exists. And maybe just talk through some of the examples and just what you're hearing or what you're doing to help.
Yeah, so some of these examples I've just recently got from the interviewee today, Louise Blaze. It's that a truck cannot leave Quebec and drive to Vancouver and drop off goods along the way without having the machine altered at every border. Stuff as bizarre as moving lights closer together or farther apart on the front bumper. That's ridiculous. But it's not just goods. It's also people. That there's, different accreditation systems in each province. Talk about social workers and caregivers and nurses, lawyers are accredited in each province. So even the mobility of people is very much constrained in Canada. So it's not just it's the regulatory barriers and it's the financial costs of doing things to satisfy multiple jurisdictions. Let me give you one more example. We've had a good conversation in the last year about manufactured housing, panelization. In fact, you could panelize an office building as well as housing. But in the Greater Vancouver Regional District, where there are some 21 different municipalities, there's 10 different building codes. Some have a 32-inch wide doorway, some have a 34-inch wide doorway, some have a 36-inch wide doorway. How can you produce a panelized wall at scale when everything's custom all across the country? Mm-hmm. Everything's slightly different. So uniformity is going to be very important as well. Those are just some examples of these interprovincial trade barriers that we have set up and we have to dismantle.
And so what does
those sound like those sound like multiple year changes though. Like a lot of stuff around the interprovincial trade. It's not when we're gonna have problems trading with the U.S. Okay, by summertime we'll all be doing interprovincial trade. This sounds like the tanker ship analogy. It's going to take a long time to come around.
Absolutely agree with you on that. I mean, let's call it 5 years, even. But part of the problem as well is that we don't have a plan. What's the plan? I mean, the plan is not just a headline every second week from someone committing to do something. Do something that's integrated, forward-looking, call it Canada 2050. What do you want this country to look like in 2050? Do a work-back schedule from 2050 on everything that has to change and start on it. Do it.
How does that work with election cycles? That's the the other difficulty, which I'm sure you encounter.
Yeah, it is. But right now, every political party is on board with this. I mean, even the NDP all of a sudden is embracing more east-west trade.
Patriotism's a hell of a motivator.
It is a threat from the outside. Threat from the outside is always a big motivator for sure.
Well, maybe we address that. Maybe address the different parties' attitude towards housing. Where do you think we're going to get the most results for our industry?
Well, let's start with the two main parties, the Liberals and the Conservatives. If you'd asked me 2 weeks ago who will win a federal election, it looked like it was a cakewalk for the Conservatives. But that has drastically narrowed at the time we're recording this podcast, and the Liberals are very close to the Conservatives. Probably riding a Carney wave at this point. So on housing policy, look, I think Sean Fraser, as the former Minister of Housing, did a terrific job. I don't think there's been any minister federally who has done as much on housing ever. And it was a bit of a, you recall, it was a bit of a pushback when Trudeau said housing is a provincial responsibility. And the population said, no, we want you, Mr. Prime Minister, to take charge of housing. And it was appropriate that he should do so. I mean, he was the one that opened the floodgates to immigration, and we were swamped with 1.3 million people in one fiscal period. But also, they have the taxation lever, they have the CMHC lever, they have the investment lever, and then they have the power to convene. So they have a lot more levers federally than you would otherwise think on the housing file. So Sean Fraser did a great job. Nathaniel Erskine Smith is a new housing minister. And you probably think to yourself, okay, well, is Nathaniel a lame duck because it's going to be an election? I'll tell you what, he's digging in. He's digging in right now and looking for ways to respond to the tariff threat in current housing policy. So that's very positive. We also have a new chair of CMHC, Don Iveson, who is a former mayor of the city of Edmonton. Don's a sharp guy. So he would bring not only the municipal perspective, but also the private sector's perspective and the governance perspective to CMHC. So on the Liberal side of the ledger, things continue to move. They continue to listen well. And I would see that continuing if the Liberals win the next election. They've got the file. The Conservatives, there's not much been released about their housing platform, so we have to wait and see. It's going to be very important for our industry that we're protective of CMHC. The ACLP program, Aaron, as you would know, critically important. The MLI Select program, just this whole certificate system.
The Canada Mortgage Bond Program.
Canada Mortgage Bond, all this stuff really supports our market, particularly the construction of new purpose-built rental. I know that that there are some marginal projects that are being pulled, development projects for purpose-built rental being pulled right now, while there are others who are noticing that overall construction costs right now are actually coming down. So is there an offset in there? Don't know. It'll depend on each.
So are rents, unfortunately. So
are rents.
So are interest rates.
But so are interest rates, yeah.
So are interest rates. So we got points and counterpoints here, and only the asset manager for any new project who has the pro forma in front of them knows whether it's still going to work.
I mean, the challenge is today it may, tomorrow it won't. The next day it will.
Yeah.
The day after that it won't. Right.
On a 4-year project.
Yeah.
Well, that's a good point, Aaron, and it's about the foreseeability piece and the risk piece. So, there's some concern about confidence about future costs with this tariff threat looming. So, if you're a prudent manager, you don't need to build. You're thinking, I think I'll just wait for some better visibility and for this fog to lift on costs before I proceed. And I think some people in our industry are kind of thinking that way. Others are, I'm going to drive on.
Do you think the tariffs are coming? Like, do you honestly?
Yeah, I do. I don't know how long they'll stay, but I do think they're coming. I say that I don't know how long they will stay because the voice of U.S. governors, and not just Democratic governors who rely on imports from Canada to keep their state functioning, whether it's their agricultural or whatever it might be, those voices are growing. tariffs on Canadian exports to the U.S. that are borne by U.S. businesses and consumers are going to be very inflationary. So there's a possibility that not only do interest rates in the U.S. not come down anymore, but start to go back up. So the public is not going to like that when they're renewing their mortgages, and businesses aren't going to like that because their cost of doing business is going to go up significantly. So there's a school of thought that, look, wait 3 months for those screams to reach a crescendo. And that may be the time that he says, okay, I'm going to back them down to 10% across the board and only 5% for oil and gas. So that's one scenario that is plausible going forward, but we will see.
Would you rather a liberal or, and I know I'm not asking you to pick your politics, but who do you think manages Trump for the 4 years in the future? Who manages that better?
It's a really good question. I don't know the conservative policy book yet on housing or the conservative industrial plan. We probably won't hear that until an election is called. Although my guess is that they are already building that in the background to have it ready. Certainly we have heard that before the tariff announcements that the Conservatives were going to be very focused, as you would expect, on getting the fiscal house in order federally. And that means some cuts to federal departments in terms of their budget allocation and out of the envelope. So that's one thing we could expect from the Conservatives. Look, the Liberals, I think that they will stay the course on housing policy, but we'd like them to make some tweaks to make it a little more business friendly. It's shocking to me that the ACLP loan program has no money for 2025. And I told the new housing minister, I said, how can that possibly be that they're out of money until 2026? A critical loan program that gets purpose-built rental apartments built is out of funding?
Yeah.
How could you let that happen? We need housing. We need rental housing.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I guess it's $500,000 per unit build cost evaporates money pretty quickly, right?
I've said this before on the podcast, but I'll do it for Michael's benefit. And I just did this when I was on the panel earlier today. CMHC issued $90 billion of certificates in 2023, and they issued $85 billion of certificates in 2024. Half of that was construction, half of that's term, but there's only about $40 billion, $35 to $40 billion of CMB access annually. So in the last 2 years, they've issued $170 billion of certificates, and there's only 45 times 2, so $90 billion of CMB funding. And there isn't enough balance sheet lending to take up the difference. So there's what is the math? An $80 billion deficit in funding availability for the demand of certificates that CMHC has issued. That hasn't yet made its way through the system. Not to mention the 2020 maturities that are 5-year term we did in 2020 that are coming through, and the whatever amount that is, that's in the multiple of billions. All of these it's coming to a head. Like, there's no place for any of this to go. We're already seeing it in 5-year pricing, but it's going to get worse. It's going to get much, much worse as all of these certificates need to find a home, and that $60 billion ceiling that they've instituted. And then, of course, they're trying to give even more of that $60 billion to single family and suppress even more of that multifamily access. So there's the CMHC space is very, very messy right now, and it's one of those things where we at First National are advocating for, and through you, quite frankly, Michael, some change to either the availability of capital or this recognition that they're creating this, I don't know what you call it, scarcity of a resource, right?
Bottleneck.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, well, look, they've got to be funded. One of the things that troubles me as an outsider about CMHC is they're an OSFI-regulated bank, so they're incented to have low risk / minimal risk. Okay, I get that. But they're very profitable, it seems to me. They take no risk, really. I mean, they're very prudent, maybe overly prudent in their underwriting. At the same time, the government expects them to be an economic development agency. And I don't know that they're equipped for that, even though they do have, equity loans or equity grants. They have a bunch of social programs. We've got to figure out what they are. Which one are you? Are you a bank? Are you an economic development group? Now, my understanding of Housing Infrastructure and Communities Canada, HICC, when it was created 2 years ago, was that, okay, it's going to be the funder. It's going to be the equity portion. And to some extent it was, but I don't think it's reached maturity yet. So maybe an expanded role for HICC. Yeah, so that's what I would say about I don't know who's going to win a coming election, but I'm hoping it's someone who is pro CMHC, pro funding, and does more and allocates more money towards housing.
It's needed.
It is needed.
Can we talk about the provinces quickly? So we are, I guess, sitting here in the precipice of an election here in Ontario. I mean, I don't think it's much of a nail biter, but which provinces are getting it right in terms of supporting housing? Or more right than the rest of them?
Yeah. Well, on the policy side of things, I don't know if I can point to one province that has it all right, because there's different growth rates in different cities. I know that the current ones that are the worst in getting it right is probably Toronto and Vancouver, frankly. We're way behind the starts required to meet the CMHC target of whatever the target is today. It was 5.3 million homes by 2030.
We just all like we changed that target because that's clearly just it's just an absolutely unachievable number.
It's
like let's
fiction.
forget about it.
Yeah, it's absolute fiction. But to get more stuff built in Ontario and BC, which are the worst in terms of starts, the most regulated, the highest taxed, we need some provincial intervention. We need certainly some control of development charges or a rollback of development charges. One of the things that we've advocated for is stop all the peripheral stuff being jammed into that development charge bundle. Mike Moffat wrote about the renaming of Dundas Square. Apparently got shoved into Section 37, which is now a development charge provision. Like, really? How is growth? Why should a young couple buying a condo downtown have to pay for the renaming of Dundas Square? So there's too much stuff in there. There needs to be a new requirement that any development charge provision, one, have a nexus to that new development site. It's a pipe, it's a road, it's a conduit, it's a transmission line, it's something, it has a nexus to that particular site. And the second thing is, if it's for peripheral stuff, fire hall, new hockey rink, new ambulance bays, etc., that there's proportionality, because existing residents, of course, are going to benefit from those kind of new amenities. I mean, if I look at the city of Toronto, I'm a hockey player. There's hardly any good skating, hardly any good rinks in the city of Toronto. There's Ted Reeve, there's a couple of others. Out in the 905, beautiful community centers with rinks and gyms. And in Markham, we've got one with a taekwondo studio, squash, racquetball, a full gym, swimming pool. I mean, like the 905 amenities, all built with development charges, are far and away better than the city of Toronto because they extract this money from all the new development. But we got to get that under control. We definitely have to get that under control. But there's a whole list after that: parkland cash and lieu levies, fees and charges for building permits, and
we had Adrian Rocan from Fitzrovia, and he's been advocating pretty aggressively for DC sunset. Like it was not deferral, like a waiver, but it was like a 2-year with the sunset. Just waive it for 2 years. Let us all get these things built as fast as possible, and then it'll be on our way. Have you heard any noise that they're entertaining that concept? Is that a feasible concept? I mean, we always talk about how the DCs the cities are so dependent on it. How could they ever? Now, I guess you'd need the federal government to subsidize that DC cost to keep the coffers going. What do you think about that concept?
Yeah, of course I like that idea. this $9 billion sitting in Ontario DC reserves. Why don't you just deploy some of that? Have a holiday until all of that's gone. Would be another example. Another example from one of our members is that charge me the DC fee at the end when I'm selling finished units so I have cash flow. Don't make me front end it and carry it for 3, 4, 5 years because that's just going to add interest cost to the overall price of the house. So there's a number of approaches, but I would start with limiting the amount of things that can go in DCs as a start.
How about spending that money? You said it. Like it's nuts to me that that's just sitting there.
It's sitting there.
We had a city councilor on. Adam, help me with his name. Sorry, Brad Bradford. Thank you. We had Brad Bradford on, and he was not shy, saying it's nuts that it's just sitting there, and we just can't figure out what to do with it. We just constantly argue with each other about what it should be used for, and so we never spend it because we can never agree on what to use it for. Like it just seems childish to me, quite frankly.
Yeah, Brad is great. He's one of the few on Toronto City Council who kind of gets it and gets the business perspective. The other thing about it is, okay, so you require us to pay the development charge up front. Why are you getting the interest on that? Why aren't we getting the interest on that while you're sitting on it?
As you mean in their escrow, whatever their escrow rates are.
Yeah. Or just pick prime -1 and call it, give us prime -1. So you'll compensate me for my interest carry in having to borrow that DC money until the time when I can sell the unit and transfer title. Why should the city get the interest as well? So
it feels like a system that was just built in the 60s when they hadn't thought through the scale and size that it was going to turn into, right?
Yeah.
Look, 20 years ago, you hardly had any DCs. A lot of municipalities had no DCs at all.
Right. So
they perceive it as free money, victimless, free money.
Yeah, we asked Brad Bradford, and certainly he was politicking to a certain degree, but we asked him about, do your colleagues and city councillors understand the math and the challenges that these DCs cause for development and everything else? And he honestly said, I'm not sure. I'm not sure they all do, because I'm not sure they believe when Adrian Roque is sitting there saying the math doesn't math, that they believe him. And, we're kind of rolling our eyes because we sit there every day looking at pro formas. The math does not math. It doesn't make sense, right? So
it's too bad.
Artificial intelligence, before we finish. Michael wanted to talk about AI and the implication of housing.
Is it a high note or a low note?
It's a high note. No, it's got to be a good thing, right? Like I'm sure ultimately this is a positive impact on housing.
Well, the key is finding the use cases for AI, but there are so many. It's developing so quickly. Let me give you an example relative to panelization. So I had a tour of a manufactured home facility outside of Ottawa, which will remain nameless. Integrated developer, buys land, gets a plan of subdivision, optimizes the plan of subdivision using AI to maximize the number of lots available. Think about doing that. Anybody else would do that very iteratively. Do one map and then, okay, can we squeeze in a 30-foot lot here? This thing will do it. AI behind the design, optimize that parcel of land after forest, after stormwater retention pond.
So you pointed it out all the permitting requirements. Right?
And it's behind the scenes, it calculates. That's an AI application for planning, zoning, and development. I asked my OpenAI ChatGPT, find me anywhere in the world where a private sector has provided automatic planning approval software for a city. I found 3 in the U.S. where a city could outsource the planning approval, not planning policy, planning approval, to an AI-based private company who will ensure that a developer submitted plan complies with that with AI almost instantly. You give me the proper drawings, it will analyze them. Why do we have planners doing that manually? It's a Boolean if then else. It's a very
rules-based works well with
that. It's totally rules-based. The other thing this particular panelized manufacturing facility did, which blew my mind, is that, so let's say again, we have a 30-foot lot, and I'm going to design a house to fit on this 30-foot lot, but I want zero waste. I want it to be a 3-bedroom. So you put a 3-bedroom house on that lot, and then you let the AI go through the calculation of all the materials required for that design, and it starts to figure out, how do I change this so I have zero waste, no bits of wood lying around on the floor? And you see it in real time. It's shifting a wall a little bit here. It's moving it down there. It's changing a corridor a little bit. It's moving a bathroom around. Stops. Zero wood waste. Compare that to a construction site. Well, you got all kinds of bits hanging around the edges, right? On the old stick. So there's another useful example of AI. And the same thing could be used for office buildings, for optimizing design, eliminating waste. So there's so many more use cases for us. At RealPac, we've now trained every one of our staff but one on AI, and 3 of us are taking the advanced course, and literally it's open on my desktop every day. So for me, I use it on the policy side of things. Tell me where in the world that they have gone from a rent-controlled system down to a system where it's rent geared to income, and how successful was it? It'll give me the countries that have done it, how they've done it, where they've done it. The amount of knowledge is stunning, and it's there for you. Let me give you a human example. So in my hockey league, my team is 2-13. The best team in my league is 16-1. Obviously, we got a governance problem. So I tasked ChatGPT, do me new terms of reference and code for a hockey league, a men's senior hockey league. How do we ensure that the teams are balanced every year, and what adjustment mechanisms can you create to keep it balanced during the year? Man, it gave me a 3-page constitution that was bulletproof with ideas that I'd never thought of to keep the teams balanced. It's so good. It's just limited by your imagination.
Yeah. Sorry about the tough season.
Yeah. It's balanced now, though.
Yeah, it's tanking. I hear the bell in the background indicating the next session. We are at a time. We've actually kept Michael past, I know, the time he's going to spend with us. We appreciate, as always, you coming by to speak with us. Thanks to the Canadian Real Estate Forum for having us here at RealCapital today as part of their speaker video series, sponsored by KingSet. Of course, First National for powering the podcast. But again, Michael, as always, a pleasure, and look forward to the next one.
Great
Michael.
conversation. Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Take care.